I don't think I have reviewed a Doctor Who story on this series before. I think Meg did in her old series. I think. Yes, she did. She reviewed a crossover between Doctor Who and Bonnie the Dinosaur because it involved the Daleks attacking Bonnie and friends. That's all I really remember of that. So yes, I believe this is my first Doctor Who story. So, How They Draw Their Light by Solstice Zero. This is on Archive of our own. So it's not rated, has no archive warnings. Category General. Fandoms, Doctor Who, The Book Thief. I've never heard of The Book Thief. Characters, Death, Book Thief. Vincent van Gogh. Okay, there was a Doctor Who episode with Vincent van Gogh. So it's a crossover, and the trigger warning for this one is suicide. So this was published back in July of 2013. It has over 2,000 words. It's only one chapter, 5 comments, 41 kudos, and 11 bookmarks, and it has 410 hits. Right, let's get this started then. Summary. Two creatures obsessed with colour meet in poor circumstances. I believe I've mentioned that distraction is my vacation. Distraction is simple when you are searching for it the way I am, did, have been, will be. It lights up the dark plate pots, or it tries to, and when your eye is as practiced as mine at spotting those flashes, you'll never want for diversions. They will spill out in front of you like a light through a half-open door. But, if I might be frank, it's very unlikely that you will avoid me long enough to master the skill. A note on frankness. You will forgive me for mine. I have found it is best to embrace eventualities. Someday, you might even appreciate it. So, I keep my eye out for the interesting, the bright spots among the dull palettes, and sometimes I'm lucky. Sometimes there is a story, an exchange of eyes, or a mouth sewing itself shut that brims at the edges with things unsaid. And those things are worth following. Largely, I am disappointed. I'll gather the subject finally into my arms, and the sky will be brittle and grey, and there will be no cards on the bedstand. I'll have followed their narrative and be left without payoff, but there are times, rare times, when that soul is warm with peace at having fulfilled their potential in a good story, and I'll be happy with the time I spent thinking about the things they have done and could do. This is not one of those stories. This is something more complicated, and inappropriately more pure. I met the painter twice. The first time was the day his father's heart stopped trying. It isn't my place to blame the human body for giving in to the temptation of rest. Indeed, that temptation is what supplies my livelihood. But surely there can be more effort involved in keeping oneself alive. I've seen those struggles countless times. However, over the faces of men and women swallowing the rattles in their throats and clawing their way back to the surface of the world, I honestly can't help but cheer for them in my own way. They know when their time is. Even if I'm uncertain, I can respect a body that knows it isn't finished. The Reverend Theodorus van Gogh knew he was finished when the pain flashed red down his left arm. I lifted his soul into my arms, and it was a queer place between heavy and light, between a gift and a burden, that so many of these men who had never been sure of themselves possessed, preaching but unable to shake the idea that perhaps there is nothing waiting for them. Hello. I turned for a look at his colours through a shuttered window, but was caught by the flat of a nail banging a crooked canvas. It was the old church tower at New Owen. I've only learned the title recently. Back then, it was The Sky. I had seen reproductions through the eyes of their creators, landscapes and portraits considered earth-shattering for their boldness, of their newness, but none had ever moved me. No human could see the world the way I saw it, could witness colour in its purest sense without tempering it. Certainly no mortal could capture my skies, my colours, my pallid collections, stacked against each other with each new soul. But this painting seemed to find the world through my eyes. It found the sky that way. I was so distracted that I never made it to the window, and stuck to the wet paint instead. It was a wonderful distraction. I took the painted noon sky as Vincent van Gogh's father's colour, and filed the man himself as someone to wait for. 3 facts before we continue. 1. I don't make a habit of looking forward to collecting a particular soul. 2. I respect the idea that most humans are not eager to make my acquaintance. 3. Vincent van Gogh was not most humans. I've never been fond of the words humans use to describe the act of taking one's own life. Suicide is a word with far too many connotations, ranging from the absurdly clinical to the obscenely personal. Self-slaughter, to borrow a phrase from the castle in Denmark, is too violent. It brings to mind gore, when gore isn't necessarily an inherent part of the act, though often it is. It was for Vincent. I thought that the bullet in the field would do the job, much the way I suspected Vincent thought it would. I watched him hold the muzzle in an awkward grip against his heart. I hovered, I admit it. I was tense. He looked so purposeful, the way that you often do, those of you who meet me this way. His nerves leaked into mine. The sky was a faultless blue, and I was vaguely disappointed in it. Just because I try to enjoy every color doesn't mean I'm always successful. It seemed too simple a color for a man so complicated. The shot dropped him mewling to the parched ground, and he inhaled warm earth. I was just as surprised as he was when he dragged himself up to his feet and started the bloody walk back to Radak's Inn. Probably said that wrong, sorry. I don't like that particular type of wait. I'd been hard-pressed to find what I do enjoy, but I'm especially discontent with the bedside vigil, filled with the gasping silence and anxious panic relief when the dying drifts off only to return again. It's the hurry up and wait. That's what I call it. But the bells and tables covered with distractions, and I ran my fingers over them while Theo van Gogh's shoulders shook at the bedside. Their twin red hair blinded passer-by through the open window, and I made myself familiar with every stroke, every pattern, every movement of the wind in every painting. It took 2 days. Vincent van Gogh's last words were these: La tristesse diria toujours. A rough translation. The sadness will last forever. I set him down in a field of waving wheat. He didn't protest, just put his feet down with soulish non-weight and tilted his head back. The light was growing long and dense, solid gold bending the stalks on all sides. It fell through his transparent chest and onto the ground behind him. I watched him watch it. I'm a fan of your work, I told him. I mean, I enjoy it. I settled my weight awkwardly on one foot and then the other. He tossed me a short, sardonic smile. Pardon me if it's rude, he said, not sounding like he wanted pardoning at all, but I don't know that I like the idea of you enjoying my work. I said nothing. I couldn't blame him, really. I'm aware that I don't have the best reputation among humans. I live in the worst neighborhoods and associate with the worst sorts of people. He was looking back up at the sky. I thought once, he said. He stuffed his hands in his pockets. I thought that there was somewhere in years to come where my work would be loved. Now, I don't know if it was just part of my madness. I hope it wasn't. I hope they were real. He looked over at me. Can you tell me? I couldn't. I didn't know what he was talking about. I shook my head. He sighed. I suppose it was just madness then. I don't know how I could have believed so long. I wanted to say that it was better this way. I wanted to tell him that if he was insane, then there should be no such thing as sanity. I wanted to say that I'd met sanity, and sanity never had a good story. They're very good, I said instead. The paintings. They're very good. He looked doubtful, as though I had any reason to butter him up. He was already dead. Which is your favourite? I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that, I said. The Seine Bridge at Asnieres, the coal barges. I slipped closer to him, vomiting words. It's the skies, I insisted. You have amazing skies. Colours. I'm an expert in skies. I collect them. It's a hobby. He was staring. I stopped. I couldn't remember the last time I had spoken to a human like this. It's normally so silent, withdrawn, all of them expectantly lifted up and carried away in my arms. They act as though they shouldn't speak to me. I would listen. When I take a soul, I also take their sky. I never told anyone. No one else would have understood. He took it in, rocking backwards on his heels, squinting at the thick daylight. He looked like he wanted his hat. A hand raked his hair. "This would be mine, then," he said. The words hovered in the hazy summer air, late July in the French countryside. Vincent van Gogh's Last Sky. The sun poured out of one gaping hole in the clouds. Each had a dark shadow on its belly that spoke of maybe rain, which we wouldn't remain to see. The hidden parts peered blue and startled through gaps, around which the wisps of clouds curled like lines of wood grain will twist around the knots of old pine. It was all mountain ranges. It was all oceans. "Is it enough?" I asked him. He looked down at the dry earth beneath us. "I don't know that I deserve it." He drifted, staying in one spot. "What have I done?" I didn't want him to regret it. I didn't want him to think about it. What's past is past. I know that so well. I've seen it so much. "How can you see them?" I asked him. "The colors. It's only you." He rolled a spike of wheat between his fingers. "I've always felt them as a challenge, to capture them, not to tame them, but to ride them out and leave them to it." He turned his face to take me in, and I could feel myself silhouetted in the beams of light, like I was the ghost. Anyone who says they tame color does nothing but dilute it. You must only hold it briefly and let it go. He held my attention. "Is that what you do?" I thought of the grey pock skies over the Great Plague in London, hanging above the bleak plague doctors and their clipped dock forms. I thought of the smoky ink and red above the great Chicago fire. I thought of the bruise and the stars over the RMS Titanic, still to come. Every disaster has three things. 1. A name attached to greatness. 2. A sky filled with color. 3. Me. The name that always stays. The color that always stays. I walk away. "Yes," I told him. "That's what I do." "So you'll remember this," he said. He was smiling a little. It made me feel better for him. There was no hole in his chest anymore, so he shouldn't worry about it. The thing back at the rocks clutched in Theo's grip was only a frame. I had the canvas. "You will, won't you? You'll remember the color of the sky when you took Vincent van Gogh." "I'll remember," I said. "I always remember. You won't be forgotten." He sighed. I always loved to see a spirit act as though they were a body, touching and breathing and speaking aloud. I loved that they were all still human. I think I will be. But I hope I am wrong. I wanted to tell him that a woman in 1967 dies with a framed poster of skull of a skeleton with a burning cigarette leaning against her bed because it's the only thing that makes her smile anymore. I wanted to tell him that Starry Night is a 17-year-old boy's mousepad image in 2011. I wanted him to know that I am everywhere and everywhen, and I can see him there. But you aren't meant to know that. None of you are. When you die, your connection to the human world ends. I can't be your link. I can't tether you. I can't stitch you back in place. You were meant to move on, like the colors. You go. I stay. It's time to leave, I told him. Are you ready? He held out a hand to me. Is anyone? I took it. Some more than others. He only laughed. I think I am, he said. We have what we need. We did, the both of us. We gathered up the colors of ourselves, the gold and blues and whites and grays. I gathered him up too, lighter than when I drifted him from his body, warm and soft in my arms. The story ended. Not a good story, but a well-crafted one. A story full of colors. And I can appreciate that. I can always appreciate that. The sky when we are gone. The sun set in deep blue, and the black over the wheat field. The stars burned hot and loud and far away. Can't you see how they roar their light? That was a really good read. That was a really good read. It's refreshing to have a good story, and I'm very glad that my first Doctor Who story was actually a good one. Poor Meg, on the other hand, her first Doctor Who story was Bloody Bonnie the Dinosaur. Yes, well, very good. That was enjoyable. And to the person who requested the story, thank you. It was a nice relief to have a good story to read. I'm afraid that the next few stories I'm going to be reviewing after this one are probably not going to be good, but we shall see. Well, if you liked today's episode, please be sure to leave a like and leave a comment. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I would greatly appreciate it. I'll see you on the next episode. Till then, cheerio.